right. Okay. Well, this week, what we'll try to do here is because of all the changes to our schedule last week, our start was a little different, and as our schedule it will change throughout this trimester. We'll get through Mao this week, and actually tomorrow we'll put a little closure to Mao. We won't have a formalized what we'll call, say, summative on Mao, but we will wrap up Mao, and then we'll get to our case study, which will be more of a summative piece there. So you definitely want to dial it in at that moment. Okay. So with that, kind of start off with a little high level thinking, if I can get you here. Looking at Mao, millions of people died in Mao's various programs for improving the People's Republic of China. Anyone want to speculate, like how many? I mean, the statistics, the numbers, and all that stuff's pretty hard to kind of pinpoint, so we got a range. Anyone want to speculate? Okay. 10 million? Yes, far more than Hitler, far more than Stalin. So we got 10 million out there. Anyone else? I would say we'll have to go higher than 10. 20 million. 20 million. Okay, we got 20 million. And I would say we're going to have to go a little higher on that one. 23. It's almost like the price is right here. 23 million. Still, I would have to say we have to go higher. We'd almost have to double it. So anywhere from 50 to 70 million people could have died as a result of Mao's policies, intentionally and unintentionally. All right, and there's probably a lot more with the unintentional versus the intentional ones. Again, we always spotlight Adolf Hitler as this ultimate authoritarian, and he is an authoritarian, definitely, and he's up there in that elite status. But and it's the Holocaust that really is what we tend to focus on, and then Stalin with his purges and all that stuff. But then you got Mao, and 50 to 70 million. And maybe when you look at the size of China and its population, 50 to 70 million might seem just a fraction, but still, that's 50 to 70 million individuals here. With that being said, can good occur through the destruction of people? Can good occur through the destruction of people? And those at home, you can always raise your hand and put it in the chat. What do we got? Can good occur through the destruction of people?
I guess it depends if you believe means justify the end, because obviously some good advancements happened for China through Mao's programs, but also a lot of people did die, and so it's just weighing, was it worth it, all those lost lives for those advancements that were achieved?
Okay. Yes. That the ends justify the means, or the means justify the ends, however you want to look at it. Yeah, from that perspective. Go ahead, Chloe.
I think it's just a question of morality versus scientific advancement, really.
Okay.
Which is more valuable to the individual, I think. I mean, because ideally, I would say no, because obviously killing people is not a good moral move.
Right.
But, I mean, there have been in the past scientific advancements due to the deaths of people, which it's not very moral for it to be that way, but it has happened.
Okay.
Whether or not it was overall a good thing in this case, I'm not really sure. but it has happened before.
Yes, it has. It has happened before. Maggie?
Yeah. Look at that and be like, well, yeah, it isn't, it is, there's black and white, right? So some people, it's always gonna be seen as, but here, like destruction of people, what are you deem those people as you're destroying them? Like, they're the bad guys,
Right.
then it's like, up in the air, it's gray area.
Yep, yep. Remember, Mao likes to, and his supporters brand those who oppose him as like rightists or capitalist roaders, and they need to go. Enemies of the state. Go ahead.
I feel like change in any capacity, like especially in this situation with all the work on the backs of especially rich people, so there's gonna be people that are not gonna be able to facilitate this change.
Okay.
They're gonna be-
Yeah, 50 to 70 million people. That's a wow. You know, that gives you a moment to pause here and kind of reflect. Okay, so just by looking at that statement, can good occur through the destruction of people? Do we have to know we have to have context. Why is it happening? What is the event? What is the motive? And look at, okay, perhaps maybe a new society is created as a result of this destruction. I guess we can look at our own events here in the United States, our own revolution. You know, can good come through the destruction of people and put the war for independence and achieving independence, but thousands of individuals have died in that process. You know, we might interpret it differently than 50 to 70 million people died because of the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, and his rectification programs and mass movements and campaigns out there. All right, it's just something to think about, you know, when we look at these authoritarians or when we look at the formations of societies here. So, something to think about. Last week, when we looked at the kind of introduce the policies, I had a video clip on the Great Leap Forward, and that was an attempt, remember, by Mao to kind of accelerate the modernization, and it was a disaster in many ways, and so he would have to take a step back. His next big move is going to come with the Cultural Revolution. And when I got here today, I remember for some reason I have a Life magazine here that has Inside China. It's 1971, and it was spotlighting some of the changes that was occurring as a result of the Cultural Revolution. Okay, and so I got a video clip here on the Cultural Revolution that I would like us to look at. And let's see if I can cue it up. Oh, whoa, David Bowie.
When the peasants saw me, they began to cry. I cried too. They said to me,
all right, so we're going to pick up with the end of the Great Leap Forward, and it's going to move into the Cultural Revolution. And don't be disturbed when you see Mao swimming. I don't understand, you know, seeing authoritarians without their shirts, you know. Benito Mussolini was the big one who would do that. But we're going to see Mao do some swimming here. So let's take a look at the Cultural Revolution, see what his intent is and what kind of results does he get. This Cultural Revolution really is going to probably be about 64, 65 to 1976. Sometimes they might say 66 is when it begins as well. So let's take a look at this. First, let me mute.
If I got there any later, they might all have been dead.
In a secret report, the party later admitted the full extent of the calamity. Their own figures showed that over 20 million had died from the famine. It was almost certainly more. The new graves in the burial grounds confirmed that the Great Leap had failed. Revolutionary enthusiasm hadn't been enough. In the aftermath, Mao kept to the side and let the president Liu Shaoqi run the country. Even Mao knew that the economy had to be protected from his revolutionary zeal for the time being. So more cautious targets were set. Large communes were abandoned. Chinese peasants were allowed some land again and could sell their produce in free markets. They were allowed to live as families and return to something near normal life. There were fewer slogans. But Mao was biding his time. He worried his revolution was going off the boil. He saw a privileged bureaucratic class emerging, as had happened in the Soviet Union. He feared the return of capitalism and materialist incentives. He believed China's chance to have a perfect socialist society was passing. Mao's supporters printed a book of quotations from his political speeches and writing, and used them as the basis for a new attack on what was called the capitalist road. We still have to wage a protracted struggle against bourgeois and petty bourgeois ideology, said Mao. As he tried to regain power, Mao used a piece of spectacular political showmanship to revive his reputation. To demonstrate his continuing vigor, at the age of 72, he led a mass swim across the river Yangtze. Trying to break the thinking and attitudes of old China, he began with her traditional culture. The 1,000-year-old Beijing opera was singled out as the start of his attack. If it could be changed, then anything could be. 8 new revolutionary plays were written to replace all the old stories of emperors and concubines. Tung Shangling, who once played princes, now took the lead as an officer in the People's Army.
我能拿到了这个角色，由我来演。
I was chosen to play this revolutionary role, and it was a great honor.
很光荣。 我们是灵魂的工程师，我们有一种。
As artists, we were engineers of human
演出
souls.
为赚钱吃饭，或者是简单的工作，而且我们有一种责
We
任
didn't
感。
just perform to
我
earn
们这种
money,
责任感
but had a serious responsibility to re-educate people.
一定的教育作用。我们非常幸福。
We were so happy that Chairman Mao was creatively involved in this opera.
By late 1966, the great proletarian cultural revolution was well underway. The group behind it, led by Mao's wife, and later to be called the Gang of Four, tried to build the Mao cult to new heights. In school, children recited his message to them. In Shanghai, at the number 6 girls' school, Xiao Ailing was the headmistress.
我们同学就感到外滩的变化、上海的变化。
The pupils came to realize that all the changes taking place in their families, at school, in Shanghai and China were brought about by Chairman Mao.
毛泽东带给我们的。
Students were used to carry the Cultural Revolution forward. For the first time, young people were encouraged to attack authority and the old hierarchy of the party. And the advice came from Mao himself. Bombard the headquarters, he said. To rebel is justified. One of the Beijing students who were the first to call themselves Red Guards was Zhang Baoqing.
Chairman Mao started the Cultural Revolution to keep up the momentum for change. Everything he said was right. We thought if we follow Mao, we can't go wrong. Only he can lead us from one victory to another.
A succession of huge rallies were held in Tiananmen Square. The master of mass mobilization had shown he could still draw a political response directly from the people. This time it wasn't the peasants in the country who did his bidding. The most educated and energetic generation in China were following his every word. The students felt excited and liberated as never before. An estimated 11 million Red Guards came to see Mao. 15-year-old Zhao Shoujun was presented to him.
时候呢，我是直顾的激动，直顾的兴奋。
I was so overwhelmed by the excitement, my mind just went blank. The only thing I wanted to do was to get a good look at Chairman Mao and shake his hand if I got the chance.
我要多握几次毛主席的手，一有机会我就要去跟那个
I shook hands with him 3 times. Because I'd been received by Chairman Mao, millions of Red Guards regarded me with awe.
认为我是。
When they saw me, they always wanted to shake the hand that Chairman Mao had shaken.
The rising fervor was directed at Mao's rivals, including President Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping. Banners attacked Liu. Even small children were taught to denounce Liu. The rage was extended to foreign governments, with attacks on Western diplomats in Beijing. Almost anyone who was in power of any kind was denounced as a capitalist roader. The whole structure of the party was brought down, including Zhong Guodong, the district secretary in Tianjin.
In all the
previous campaigns, I'd been singling people out and telling them their mistakes. I was the one who found fault with them. I didn't expect the tables to be turned on me this time round.
对这个走资派呢特别恨。
Some of the biggest high school students who were very loyal to Chairman Mao pressed my head down, twisted both my hands behind my back, and made me bend over throughout the denunciation meeting.
接受批判，我没想能够活过来。
I didn't think I'd survive.
In Sichuan, Luo Shifa, the party secretary who'd helped his village through the famine, was denounced.
发动文化大革命，没有预料会冲到我们头上来，晓得没？为啥子？
I didn't expect the Cultural Revolution would affect me. Why should it?
没有做坏事。
I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. And always had the support of the people.
群众拥护，就是他们会是有斗嘛，开会嘛，啊，不等于打一下嘛。
At the denunciation meeting, they slapped my face and forced me to kneel down.
规则都晓得家人便饭，你晓得么？啊，规则啥？
Kneeling on hot charcoal and broken glass was almost a daily routine. So what I did was to put a soft pad inside my trousers, and that made it easier when I was forced to my knees.
In schools, pupils attacked their teachers.
所以就是这么一个好校长。
Our headmaster had been really good to us, but even he couldn't escape. We didn't hate him personally, but he represented bourgeois values, so we had to attack him. We dragged our headmaster onto the school stage, then the students put a dunce's cap on his head and a big placard around his neck. The more extreme we were, the more we felt Chairman Mao.
In Shanghai, the teacher who had taught her class to love Mao was now accused of being disloyal.
There were several hundred Red Guards wearing armbands. Others had military belts. Some had scissors in their hands ready to cut people's hair. They chopped off my hair and beat me with sticks. They ordered me to produce the Red Book and to recite that revolution means rebellion and violence. That day I was wearing a white shirt without pockets, so I wasn't carrying the Red Book with me. They said, if you're not carrying the Red Book, that means you aren't loyal to Chairman Mao. How dare you say you love Chairman Mao? You deserve to be overthrown. It was December in Shanghai and very cold. They ordered me to stand outside in the playground from morning till night. But then they thought the punishment wasn't severe enough. So they got a big blackboard and pressed it down on it. One of them stood on the right side and one on the left like a seesaw, and I was squashed in the middle. They wanted to knock me down and keep me down forever.
Xiao Ailing was left with permanent injuries to her face. Up to 1 million were killed or driven to suicide. The country was now in the grip of a revolutionary mania that became more and more violent and destructive. The Red Guards attacked the Four Olds: old habits, old ideas, old customs, old culture. Books were burnt and museums pillaged. Soon, rival factions of Red Guards fought one another.
We used clubs and guns. Many were beaten until they bled, others died. But we all felt we were the true defenders of Chairman Mao's revolution. To die for the great leader was an honor.
The anarchy spread. Schools and hospitals closed. Offices and factories were in chaos.
半平的那个阶段了，他不干不了活了。
The factory almost
little chaotic. Heck yeah, chaotic. Got caught up. Rival factions going at it, and once again, productivity, all that stuff will go down because they're in a state of chaos. You know what ultimately is going to end it? Mao's going to die, and when Mao dies, the energy for the Cultural Revolution will pass away. So 1976, then moving away from it. So, all right, what you can see though, when you did that policy activity and see how Mao is going about reshaping society, culture is a part of it. Culture might be in the arts, but also in just the education process too. And they become the vehicles for the change as well. All right, so let's build on that. I did open an activity called the sources activity. Let's open that up. All right, you can get that here. We'll do a few of this together just to get a little sense. So let me stop that. Let me just, yes. Yeah, go ahead. So what I'll do is, you know, when we did sources activity a little while ago, it was looking at certain paper one skills. And this will be one of our last times that we'll formally look at paper one skills, where you got to comprehend a source, maybe do a little compare and contrast, possibly an OPVLC, and kind of put it all together here. We'll do some of this together, and this is something that we'll start today, and we'll finish. We'll put some closure to it at the front end of tomorrow with this. All right, and when we approach doing these sources activity, remember, our goal is always to work towards this last question, which is kind of putting it all together. That's that synthesis of using the sources and making a claim on the question. And what we want to see is what impact did those policies have on the lives of the Chinese people. I think over the past several days, we already got a good sense that life did change. Some could look at it as a positive change. Others could look at that there was some negative aspects that was going on here as well. Mao, again, is trying to modernize China. Mao is trying to revigorate China and throw off foreign domination and just get Chinese people to look at themselves in a greater light here. All right, and so when we look at these sources, all right, this first source, and I'm just going to jot down here, this first one is going to look at marriage laws. All right, and you might want to reference it because that can help us, give you a little context as you approach it. And we'll do some of these again, like I said, together. And then maybe when you look at that last question, if you go back and you have an idea of what it is. So I would jot it down. This next one, it's a poem, but it's going to focus on the Great Leap Forward. All right, might be a critic of the Great Leap Forward. We have a poem here. All right, and the Great Leap Forward program starts in about 1958-ish and goes to about 1962. All right, so source D or C and D are both focusing on what we call the first 5-year plan. And remember, the 5-year plans was an idea of Joseph Stalin. And at first, China was following the formula of the Soviet Union. And then in 1957, 58, it's going to kind of stray from that formula. And also in source D also focuses on the first 5-year plan. Okay. Source E and D are both going to be sources that look at Great Leap Forward statistics. All right. So both of them are looking at Great Leap Forward stats. And one thing we always, when we get statistics from authoritarian regimes, sometimes, we always got to have a little asterisk by it because we don't know necessarily how accurate the numbers are, and having access to archives. Didn't have Google back then, so Google can't keep everything. All right, and source G is that is looking at the Cultural Revolution. Right, so we have a lot of sources. I mean, we have sources that are going to span Mao's time as leader of China. So we should be able to get a good sense then of what kind of impact he has on the lives of the Chinese people. Okay. So when we look at the first question, so we'll do the first question here together. It is a poster that probably would be plastered up on a wall, on a side of a building, a billboard, something that you wouldn't necessarily find in a magazine or so forth, and because these will be part of these mass campaigns out there. So the slogan reads, freedom of marriage, happiness, and good luck. All right, and so when we look at what is the message of source A in regards to gender equality, okay, now we have to fall back on what we know about the type of society that Mao is going to create, and some of those early changes in regards to families, to women in general here. All right, so when we look at posters, we might have to bring in some prior information that's going to help us answer this question. All right. So what does source A indicate? What does it indicate about gender equality here? About gender equality. If we think about, how are women impacted by some of these new policies?
well, arranged marriages are no longer allowed in China. And women get a lot more freedom, especially in terms of marriage. So it could indicate that there is more equality when it comes to marriage and marriage decision.
Okay, I like that. Source A indicates new status of marriage. Not arranged. Not arranged. Again, in theory, and most likely this new status of, I gotta spell status correctly here. The new status of marriage, where would that most likely be found though? If we broke it up into urban versus rural China. Probably more urban. I mean, it's very densely populated. You'll probably see this more often. It's going to be harder in the countryside to do that there. But, and so, you know, it's a work in progress, but it happens. So what this really looks like is, so source A indicates a new status of marriage, not arranged. This new status, so you can just say this new status reflects gender equality. Women can choose who they want to marry or not marry. Right? So here, when you look at source B here, it's a poem. And like I said, it's going to be about the Great Leap Forward. But I think the nugget of information to help us answer it is in that little blurb after it. The poem was written by Peng in 1958. And Peng was a military leader, one of the greatest in Chinese communist history. So he became a senior military commander under Mao and participated in the Long March. So he's kind of got the pedigree to be a high-ranking official in the proletariat. He's with Mao in those big moments. And he was Minister of National Defense, which is huge. And when he was removed, though, criticizing the military and economic policies of the party. You can't do that, all right? And Peng was posthumously rehabilitated in December of 1978 under the post-Mao regime, which is something that Deng Xiaoping is going to try to do. He does become a casualty of the purge that happens during like the 100 Flowers campaign. So he does become a casualty as a result of that. So when we look at the poem itself, millet is scattered all over the ground. The leaves of the sweet potatoes are withered. The young and the strong have gone to smelt iron. To harvest grain, there are children and old women. How shall we get through next year? I shall agitate and speak out on behalf of people. All right, and so if we look at this, we know that during the Great Leap Forward, what happened in the countryside that is going to contribute to millions of people dying? A famine. A famine happens here. In here, is he in some ways referencing the famine? He is, by how shall we get through next year? And it's also referencing harvesting the grain. What else does he indicate in here?
That the young and strong people who would normally be tending to the farms have fallen on to smelt the iron, work the iron.
Okay, all right. And the person who wrote this is Peng, and I think it speaks to that last line in the poem. I shall agitate and speak out on behalf of the people. Why does Peng think he can do that?
High status.
High status, and he's close to Mao, so he thinks, yeah, I can say that. You know, Mao's kind of like, you know, I'm in his inner circle. I should be able to do that. You know, you got your friends. And you know that sometimes you can be very honest with your friends, and most of the time they're going to take it. So Peng's thinking, okay, I'm going to be very open and honest with Mao, and because I think he can take it. He couldn't take it because Peng gets sent to the countryside. So when we look at the message here, you know, what can we say about, what could one statement we could say about the message here, about source B? Anyone want to throw an idea out there?
It's critical, great leap forward.
All right, so source B is critical. A great leap forward. All right. And so part of that criticism is, you know, the source highlights concerns about the crop, concerns about harvesting, which we had mentioned. You know, and that would be like workers. Lack of workers. Whoa. All right. Let's see something here. Gotta make sure that I've shared my screen. So every time that pops out like that. So lack of workers to harvest, the lack of workers would be one of the big things there. And there is a concern for the future. So by showing a concern for the future, it also kind of is a lack of maybe trust that maybe Mao can carry them through it. And I guess here we find that Mao is pretty sensitive. It's pretty sensitive. All right. Questions on that? All right. So here, this will be the last one we'll do together here. All right. And so let me just jack that up here. So looking at a couple of these charts. All right. So we're going to do source C. We'll do question 3 together. It is like a compare and contrast because we want to look at how would you use source C and D to support an argument that the first 5-year plans was a success for China. All right. And so what we want to look at is you got to look at statistics that show, yeah, success is happening. In this first one here, we are looking at gross output value and physical output. 1952 is when it begins and goes for 5 years, and then 1957. And so you're comparing where it starts to where it ends, where it starts to it ends. Physical, same thing, you know, with the coal, all that. And then you look at consumption, annual consumption. All right, so we see what it was like prior or at the beginning of the Civil War to 1956, and you see if there's an increase here. It looks like, without like digging deep into it, just on the surface, looking at those numbers just on the surface, does it look like success has happened? without like digging in, getting like all Mr. Swentz here and digging in on the numbers. On surface, does it look like success? Yeah, definitely. It looks like success. Looks like gross output and physical output has increased, and it looks like consumption has increased. All right. So if we are to make a statement then here, we are to make a statement based on what we just said, and those would be accurate statements. Both sources indicate the first 5-year plan was successful. And how do we arrive at that? Source C indicates that both gross output value and physical output has increased in 1957. And to show that one's standard of living has improved, consumption goes up, right? If we see that, you can tell that standard of living has gone up because consumption has increased, I want more sugar. I got a little bit more money in my pocket. I can have some sugar, or have more tea. Actually, tea went down. That was a bad idea. Or more coal, more oil, more veggies. There we go. Got to have more veggies. So, source D indicates that standard of living improved because consumption had increased. So with that type of numbers, that's going to give Mao some courage. Now, let's take it to another level. And that's where the Great Leap Forward kicks in. Great Leap Forward in some ways could be looked at as like the second 5-year plan. But he throws out the playbook. All right. So your task now is, and you can work with a historical buddy if you want to, just keep your distance, all that stuff. Question 4, 5, and 6. We will do 6 together tomorrow. So realistically, see if you can get 4 and 5 done before you leave. And if you want, you can start with looking at 6. Remember with 6, is you got to think of some sources that are really going to help you answer some of those questions. And any of these would be good indicators here to help you with that. Outside information, remember, is things that this does not take into consideration. So you might want to start kind of brainstorming some of that. All right. So 2 things. One, you want to make sure you have that miles policy done. 11:59, I guess technically is the deadline for that. And then before you walk into my class tomorrow, let's have 4 and 5 done so we can tackle 6 together. All right? Questions, comments, concerns with that? All right, I'll cut you loose to work on that, please. All right. Get at it. Those at home can exit.